නීල පබලු අද රාත්‍රී 9ට සිරස ටෙලිතිරයෙන්.
A very good evening and welcome. This is Newsfirst Primetime News Bulletin coming to you live and direct from our Newsfirst studios here in Colombo. Today was especially a very important day for Sri Lanka as the 2024 appropriation bill was presented by President Ranil Wickremesinghe in Parliament in his capacity as the Finance Minister. We have a comprehensive breakdown of the key takeaways from the 2024 budget as well as expert opinions and also opinions expressed by various politicians and intellectuals as well, and other news from here at home and around the globe as well. So without further ado, let's start off with a look at your headlines for tonight.
2024 budget will design the future of the nation, says the President. Public sector employees to receive an additional 10,000 rupees from January. Pension payments and senior citizens' allowances to be increased. Borrowing limit to be increased by 3,450 billion rupees. It would be a challenge to discuss with the IMF and creditors any proposal to reduce the personal income tax, which is being paid by 20% of the population, says an annexure in the budget. Burden on the masses will not reduce. Dr. Harsha responds to budget 2024.
ජයවන්ත බර අඩු වෙන්නේ නැහැ. දැන් මෙතන පුද්ගලිකාංශයේ වැඩි හරියක් මෙතන ඉන්නේ 90%. හරි. එතකොට ඒ කට්ටියට 10000ක් හරි වැඩි කර ගන්න පුළුවන් මේක. එතකොට අනිත් දේ තමයි විශාල විෂයට ණය ගැනීමේ සීමාව වැඩි කරා. ඉතින් මේ ණය කොහෙන්ද ගන්නෙ? හරි පොලි අනුපාත වලට මොනව වෙයිද? නෑ ඒක තමයි මම කියන්නේ ඉතාමත්ම අමාරු තැනකින් තමයි ජනාධිපතිවරයා මේක.
Chairman of the Central Environment Authority, who was remanded on charges of bribery, granted bail. Sports Minister Roshan Ranasinghe lodges a complaint at the CID. Legendary Sri Lankan cricketer Aravinda De Silva inducted to the ICC Hall of Fame. David Cameron returns to UK government as Foreign Secretary.
Your top story for tonight, the 2024 budget was presented to Parliament today. The biggest relief presented by the budget was the increase of the cost of living allowance provided to state sector employees by 10,000 rupees. Up next is a full report summarizing the key takeaways from this year's budget.
One of the key takeaways from the 2024 budget in terms of providing relief to the people was the increase of the cost of living allowance provided to state sector employees by 10,000 rupees. The allowance will be provided from the 1st of January 2024.
From the
2024 budget, we will increase the cost of living allowance by 10,000 rupees to 17,800 from January. The Treasury will start getting its income from February and March. Therefore, we will be able to add this allowance to the salaries by April. Balance accumulated from January to March 2024 will be paid in installments within a 6-month period starting from October 2024. There are 730,000 public pensioners in the country. As of now, they are getting a 3,525 monthly bonus. The monthly cost of living allowance of public pensioners will be increased to 6,025 rupees by 2,500 effective from April 2024. W&OP scheme is a contributory pension scheme in which employees contribute 6 to 7% of their basic salary. The government spends 65 billion rupees annually for the payment of the W&OP scheme. The total annual contribution from employees for W&OP scheme is 38 billion rupees. Hence, the contribution from the public employees is not sufficient for the payment of the same. Therefore, I propose to revise the deduction percentage from the salary for this pension contribution to 8% 8% for all service categories from April 2024 onward. With this adjustment, an additional 9 billion rupees can be collected annually, and it will ensure the continuity of the pension scheme for widows, widowers and orphans.
වැඩි කිරීමට යෝජනා කරනවා. එම ගැළපීම මගින් වසරකට රුපියල් බිලියන 9ක් එකතු කර ගැනීමට හැකි වෙනවා.
It has been proposed to increase to 8% from next April for the contribution of widows and orphans who contributed between 6 and 7% of the government employees' salary. The monthly cost of living allowance of public pensioners was increased by 2,500 rupees. This allowance will be distributed from April 2024. Distress loan facilities will be given to all the public servants effective from 1st of January 2024. It has been proposed to increase the 5,000 rupee food and lodging allowance of officers in the police department to 7,500 rupees. Elders' allowance was increased by 1,000 rupees. Accordingly, the allowance will now be 3,000 rupees. The benefits provided under the Aswasuma program have been increased, and it was proposed to pay the arrears of those who were not included in the list so far. It was proposed to provide a monthly allowance of 4,500 rupees to pregnant mothers. The President also presented proposals to rebuild small and medium-scale entrepreneurs who were adversely affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and the economic crisis.
SMEs should be further strengthened, encouraged and facilitated. For this purpose, we are introducing a concessionary loan scheme of around 30 billion rupees with the support of the Asian Development Bank. This program is the first phase of action which will collectively provide a major impetus to the SMEs. In addition to concessionary credit facilities, capacity development programs are implemented for the participating institutions.
The budget introduced a new program called the Urumaya. It expects to provide land that were taken over by the 1897 Waste Land Ordinance back to the farmers. The President said this will provide 2 million families the ownership of land and farmland.
Although around 100 years have passed, the ownership of those farmlands have not been handed back to the farmers who own them. As mentioned in the drama Chalk Circle, farmers with good conduct should win the land and villages. We are handing over the lands to farmers who lost the ownership of their traditional lands during the British colonial era. We expect to commence this task in 2024 and complete it within another few years. I would like to thank Rajitha Senaratne for enacting this back in 2003. I hope that Minister Gayantha will provide his support to this endeavour. He started this. We stand with these proposals. He did it in 2003 under a UNP government. Were you against the original ownership of land under the Land Development Act permit?
මෙතුමා කරපු එක ආරම්භ කරපු එක ඒ යෝජනාව ඉන්නේ අපි එතුමා එක කරේ 2003 UNP ආණ්ඩුව යටතේ දැන් මිනිස්සුන්ට ඉඩම් දෙන එකයි ඉඩම් සංවර්ධන පනතේ පර්මිට් අනුව ඉඩම් ඇත්ත වශයෙන්ම සින්නකට ඔප්පු කරන එක විරුද්ධද විරුද්ධ මරික් කමන්තිතුමා hina වුණානේ.
Houses constructed under various urban development programs have been rented to low-income families.
නාගරික නිවාස හිමිකම් විවිධ නාගරික වැඩසටහන් නැති
Houses constructed under various urban development programs have been rented to low-income families. A monthly rent of around 3,000 rupees is obtained from those families. I will completely stop collecting rent from these families. Not only that, the full ownership of these houses will be given to those families. In 2024, nearly 50,000 families will be given the ownership of these houses.
අපේ ප්‍රසන්න ඇමතුමාට ස්තුතිවන්ත වුණ 2024 වර්ෂයේදී පවුල් 50,000කට ආසන්න සංඛ්‍යාවක් නිවාසවල අයිතිය ලබා දෙනවා. කොළඹ නිවාසයකට සහයෝගය දෙන්න. වතුකඩේ ජීවත් වන්නේ ඉඩම් හිමි ජනතාවක් නෙමෙයි.
Estate dwellers are not owners of land. We will take steps to grant land ownership and build houses for them. As the initial step, I expect to allocate 4 billion rupees.
The President also proposed a new method in which funds will be allocated for regional development activities.
We will recommence the decentralized budget program. I will provide 11,250 million rupees through the district coordination committees for this purpose. This program will be implemented under the supervision of the Department of National Planning using a methodical and standard approach.
කාටද නැත්තේ කිව්වේ
You came into politics. That is why the people rejected. The people took to the streets because of the district coordination committees.
The budget proposed to allocate 55 billion rupees to recommence and complete projects that were halted owing to the economic crisis. 10 billion rupees was allocated for the renovation of roads which have become dilapidated. The 2024 budget also paid attention to education. The President said broad structural reforms for education will be enacted.
Further details regarding the reforms of the educational reforms will be presented by the Education Minister. We will take steps to establish 4 new universities considering the current trends. For the technical sector, Sitavaka Science and Technology University, Lalit Athulat Mudali Postgraduate Institute will be incorporated to this university. Kurunagala Technology University under the Kotalavala Defence University, Management and Technology University, International University of Climate Change. Also, I propose that the rules and regulations should be adopted to convert the following private higher education institutions that are currently in operation into universities: NSBM, Sri Lanka Institute of Information Technology, Horizon Campus and Royal Institute. As per the 13th Amendment, provincial councils have been empowered to establish universities. We expect that provincial councils will also establish universities in the future. The Minister has proposed to establish an education university focused on education by integrating 19 colleges of education. Bachelor of Educational degrees will be offered to students who complete a 4-year program under an existing college of education in accordance with the relevant standards. A new technology university will be established in Canada under the guidance of IIT University in Chennai, India. India will fully support us in this endeavour. A program to enhance state universities to suit the modern era will be implemented. This program will be commenced at the Peradeniya University.
Adding further, the President said national education universities will be established and that state universities will be developed. The budget allocated 500 million rupees to provide English literacy to all by 2034. It was also proposed to reintroduce a Suraksha Students Insurance Scheme, which was introduced in the year 2016. The President proposed several programs to increase the quality of the health sector. The budget also includes proposals to modify the agriculture and fisheries sector. It was proposed to implement a special program to increase milk production by 53% in 5 years, a pilot project to support the construction sector, which has been adversely affected.
Government agencies will provide free lands. We will allow construction companies to construct buildings on those lands according to the plans of the respective government agencies. After construction, these institutions will pay monthly rent to the construction company. Upon recovering the construction cost and receiving corresponding dividends, the full ownership of the building will be handed over to the government agency. The construction of the new building complex of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs will be implemented as the first pilot project.
The President also spoke on the need to create a land connectivity between Sri Lanka and India.
We expect to initiate land connectivity between Sri Lanka and India. We expect to utilize Colombo Port to meet the supply needs of Southwest India and Trincomalee Port to meet the supply needs of Southeast India.
Allocations have been made through this budget to resettle those who lost their homes in the north and the east and also to pay compensation to missing persons. Further allocations were made to implement the Paliyaru water project to resolve the drinking water issue in Jaffna. Funds were assigned to develop the Punarin city, complete the construction of the Galle District Auditorium, establish an economic centre in Bandaravela and to expedite the Lower Malvathuai project. Outlining matters concerning Sri Lanka's cultural sphere, President Wickremesinghe mentioned that budgetary allocations will be made to establish a Mahavihara University, establishing an international Buddhist library in Anuradhapura and establish a Buddhist culture museum in Kandy.
We know that cricket in Sri Lanka is currently facing an institutional crisis and a shortage of talent. 1.5 billion rupees will be allocated from this budget for the development of school cricket and for for providing necessary facilities to cricket players at the provincial level. Schools and provinces with less facilities are given priority in providing this allocation.
A pilot project of running 200 electric buses will be commenced in the Western Province. 2 billion rupees to be allocated to complete basic activities for the construction of an international airport in Hinguragoda. The President also announced that the Kadavatha to Meeligama section of the Central Expressway will commence as soon as the foreign debt restructuring process is completed. He also underscored the importance of giving 20% of the two state-owned banks to strategic investors to ensure financial stability in the country. The President iterated on the need to establish trade agreements with regional nations, including China and India, to develop the economy. He went on to mention that an environment conducive for foreign investments will be created in the country, adding that the mechanism for transactions carried out at borders will be simplified. President Wickremesinghe highlighted that it is imperative to persist with the current economic program.
Creating fairy worlds will not solve these problems. We have to find answers to these questions gradually and scientifically. These issues should be resolved without breaking the concept of symbiosis. That is the challenging work we are doing now. What will happen if we terminate this practice as suggested by some opposition groups? Or what will happen if this practice is interrupted and disrupted? The series of reforms carried out with the support of the International Monetary Fund will stop. If that happens, the debt restructuring operation will come to a standstill. Confidence is broken and foreign exchange flow into the local banking system will stop. With the shortage of foreign exchange comes the shortage of essential goods. Power cuts, fuel shortages occur again. The prices of goods and inflation are rising beyond imagination. I request all the parties of this house to join the work order to rebuild the country. If there is a better program than ours, present it to this house in detail. Let's discuss. Let's implement the most suitable program. Let's inherit a proud title for our future generation.
The summary of the budget estimates 2024 notes that the total revenue and grants is expected to be 4,127 billion rupees. However, the total expenditure is estimated at 6,978 billion rupees. The deficit for 2024 will be 2,451 billion rupees. Debt service payments for the year 2024 amounts to 6,919 billion. Accordingly, the total gross borrowing requirement to be recorded in government accounts will be 7,350 billion rupees. Bank recapitalization and external debt restructuring will require the issuance of new debt instruments with longer maturities. Therefore, budget allocations are needed to settle the existing debt and the borrowing limit needs to be increased. Accordingly, I propose to increase the borrowing limit from 3,900 billion rupees to 7,350 billion rupees by 3,450 billion rupees.
Although the President spent much time during this year's budget speech explaining the government's expenditure proposals, he did not spend as much time explaining the proposals for achieving revenue. The tax reforms that have been included in the budget have been attached as an annexure.
One of the key requests of Sri Lanka's professionals was that the heavy tax burden should be lifted. Professionals who earn more than 100,000 rupees per month are taxed at rates between 6% and 36%. An annexure to the budget presented by the President states that the personal income tax is applicable only to 20% of the population. The annexure states that it would be a serious challenge to request the IMF and other creditors for approval to reduce the personal income tax of this 20% of the population less than a year after commencing a program with the IMF. However, the budget proposal states that there are several other proposals to reform taxation. Accordingly, amendments are to be brought to the Inland Revenue Act No. 24 of 2007. Special efforts will be made to identify and prosecute those who have not filed tax returns. Meanwhile, steps will be taken to identify taxpayers at occasions such as opening of bank accounts, obtaining approval for building plans, registering a vehicle and registering a property deed.
President Ranil Wickremesinghe presented his second budget to the Parliament today, and it was the 78th budget of Sri Lanka.
to presenting the budget proposals in Parliament today, the President commented on the country's economic situation and the background in preparing the budget.
Lord Buddha has elucidated on a concept called Samajivikata. He explained this concept in the Vyagga Sutra. The concept elaborates on how to balance our budget. But for the majority of the 75 years following the independence, our spending has often diverged from our generated revenue. We resorted to borrowing or printing money to provide jobs, increase salaries, distribute free rice, offer relief, and maintain state-owned enterprises. In the Vyagga Sutra, the Lord Buddha has emphasized that we should borrow for investment rather than for consumption. But we borrowed for consumption. In the sutra, in Anguttara Chakka Nipata, specifically points out that it is very dangerous to borrow and pay interest in this manner. Our economy collapsed completely, leading us to a status of bankruptcy. The situation reached a point where we felt as if we were left not with a country, but we were in a state akin to hell. No one stepped up to accept the challenge of rescuing the country in the face of this challenge. We successfully redirected the economy, which was derailed and collapsed, to get back on track. This is the moment to implement enduring and sustainable actions. To propel the economy forward, these actions must be undertaken. It is through these measures that we can fully rejuvenate the economy, rescue it from the brink of collapse. This is not an easy task. You might tell fairy tales, but the progress of a country cannot be achieved through such narratives. A country cannot be developed in making false promises. The country moved backwards because of the electoral promises made by political parties throughout time. We have witnessed that the ultimate result of this is the country becoming bankrupt. Unfortunately, many segments of the population have not come to realize this yet. I beseech you that we should stop propagating lies for political motives. Let's be honest with ourselves. Even without increasing the revenue, salaries can be increased. But how? We have to print money, or else we borrow from a foreign country, or else impose new taxes. That is against the Samajivikata principle. Such actions may again drive the country downwards. Some political groups are against restructuring the Ceylon Electricity Board as an efficient institution. They demand to reduce the power tariff at any cost. This will lead us again to be trapped in the same vicious cycle. It is against the Samajivikata concept. 93 billion rupees is spent each month to finance the salary bill of the government. 70 billion rupees is required for the social welfare schemes such as Aspasuma, Elders Allowance, pensions, etc. Meanwhile, 220 billion rupees is spent to settle loan interest payments. The public expenditure spent on these requirements is 383 billion rupees per month. The government revenue collected within the first 9 months of the year 2023 is 215 billion rupees. The shortage is 168 billion rupees. To meet this shortage, it is compelled to obtain more loans. Our revenue target for this year is 3,415 billion rupees. Out of that, we have collected 2,410 billion rupees so far. The major portion of the government revenue, 35%, is spent on public servant salaries and social welfare. The public suffers due to the loss-making state-owned enterprises. The loss of these institutions is borne by the public. The political groups that call them national treasures are piling up the burden on these loss-making state-owned enterprises and pulling the whole nation backward. This is a budget that constructs the future of the country. This is a budget that was prepared for the victory of the country. Some people denote this budget as an election budget. The reason is the presidential election and the general election is scheduled in the next year. Such a budget is designed to provide various concessions and salary increments aiming at an election victory. This is what happened during the past 75 years since the independence. However, this election budget is different. This is a budget that constructs the future of the country. This is a budget that was prepared for the victory of the country.
මේ අයවැය රටේ ජයග්‍රහණය වෙනුවෙන් සකස් කළ අයවැයක්.
MP Dr. Harsa De Silva says that this budget will not provide a significant relief to the burden on the people.
One thing we know for sure is that an election will be held next year because the president has prepared for it and given many benefits. A salary increase of 10,000 as an allowance, but it will be received from April 1st. Then I think there will be elections in April and October. If we look at this deeply, there are two things in this. One is the direction we should go. That is the direction to reform the economy of this country. The economy needs to undergo severe restructuring. We need to break the chains that bind the country. It can be seen that there is an effort to move towards that direction. But the question is, can this be implemented? The reason for that is the increase in VAT when it comes to the Gazette, although the President did not say it today. For example, VAT has been given to extension machinery. Because of the extension given to all these machines, the big, small and medium businessmen cannot do any work. The VAT increased on one side and the Social Security levy increased on the other side. It is not increased, but the threshold is reduced. For example, if the Social Security levy gets 120 million, now it will be reduced to 60 million. After that, if the VAT is 80 million per year, it will be reduced to 60 again. Then the President did not talk about such things. Those will be given in the Gazette. This is just like a plane going in one direction, but if there is a great turbulence, the plane is likely to crash. I sympathize with the President that the budget is not an easy budget, but the enormous burden that the people feel does not decrease. The other thing is that the borrowing limit has been decreased in a big way. Where will these loans be taken from and what will happen to the interest rates? The President did this from a very difficult position. We don't need to be hypocritical. The problem is on the ground. What is the reality? The people are in a place where they can't live. So even if this is all right, how can this be implemented?
Here are some of the views expressed by the opposition leader and several others about the budget.
The story that was narrated based on Buddhism is indeed an insult to Buddhism. It can be identified as an act to trying to deceive the people of the country by presenting a retail budget like this under this government led by the President, which is unable to meet the revenue targets of the agreement reached by the IMF and cannot even receive the second level agreement with the IMF. Why is this allowance being given from the month of April? Because it is more appropriate for the political schedule. It is not given from January to April because there is no money. There is no proposal to recover the stolen money from our country. Why? Because this is a government that depends on thieves. It seems that he has presented many of these facts in the last budget as well, and they have not been implemented. So it seems that they have been presented again. The same thing is being read twice. The question is whether or not they have been implemented at the ground level. He has come in as the finance minister of the SLPP, so then our policies should be reflected in the budget proposals. No matter how many fairy tales and beautiful stories are told, there is no point if it is not implemented practically on the ground.
මන්ත්‍රීතුමා කිව්වා ගිය පාර ටිකම ඇවිත් තියෙන වැඩක් නැහැ කියලා මේ අය වෙයි. ඒ මතේ යකින් පක්ෂයක් විතර ඉන්නේ තේ මතේද? පක්ෂේ නේ මතේ තාම ගත්තේ නැහැ. සහයෝගය දෙන්න පුළුවන් මේ අවස්ථාවම සහයෝගය දෙනවා. දෙන්න බැරි දේවල් දෙන්නේ නැහැ. ජනාධිපතිවරයාත් එක්ක සාකච්ඡා කරාද මීට කලින් අයවැය යෝජනා සම්බන්ධයෙන්? නැහැ. අන්දනේ පක්ෂේ වෙනත් ගියාද කියලා මං ගියේ නැහැ. රාජ්‍ය සේවකයන්ට වැටු යන බලාපොරොත්තුවක් තිබුණා. ඒක දුන්නානේ. ඊට දුන්නා 10 ඊට පස්සේ ජනාධිපතිතුමනි දැන් මේ රාජ්‍ය සේවකයන්ගේ වැටු වැඩි කිරීම දීලා ඒකේ මුල් මාස තුනේ ඒ ඉන්දියාවල දෙන්නේ ඔක්තෝබර් මාසේ. ඒතකොට නොවැම්බර් ඡන්දයක ජනාධිපතිවරයෙකුට දෙනවා මේක. ඒක වැඩි හොඳයිනේ. මේක ඇතුළු නැහැ. ඔය වෙලාවට හරි දෙනවනේ.
His entire proposals were prepared in the same way as borrowing and selling. In particular, he presents in the budget document that it was expected to borrow 3,900 billion rupees in the Appropriation Act. While presenting the budget document, he says to increase the borrowing limit by another 3,400 billion. It is a re-extension of the confession of the tragedy that is included in the budget proposals. His economic policy is pushing our country and our country's economy again on the same old failed journey. It is evident from this budget document. Debt restructuring has not been done yet, and there are still hurdles to do it, and it will be difficult to accomplish any of this without making it successful. There are only fairy tales. Although 120 budget proposals were presented last year, about 90% were not implemented this year. However, we see the living expenses allowance added to the salaries of government employees by 10,000s of rupees as a small thing given to those who are struggling to make ends meet. But in general, to recover from the economic crisis, the government should expand the domestic production of the country. No effort is seen for that in the budget. In this way, something is given from one hand, but before it is received, the cost of living increases greatly. Taxes have not been reduced, but from today people have to bear the huge cost due to VAT. I can honestly say that the President has submitted this proposal with the support of all of us, following the highest financial management rules that can be presented. There is no other hope, no trick here. The only thing that has been done here is to adjust this necessary expenditure to match the state revenue pattern.
Now, at the end of the budget speech, the tea party, traditionally offered by the finance minister to all the members of parliament, was held at the parliamentary complex. The trade union collective engaged in a protest near the Diyatha Uyana in Battaramulla this afternoon, emphasizing their demand for an allowance of 20,000 rupees from the budget.
The trade union collective protested, demanding that all employees receive a salary increment or allowance of 20,000 rupees and that the government employees pension scheme that was abolished by the 2016 budget be reintroduced. Representatives of several states, semi-state and private institutions were present at the protest. The police, the special task force and the anti-riot unit also implemented extreme protective measures opposite the Diyatha Uyana in Battaramulla.
We ask how the people of this country are expected to pay their increasing electricity bills, the water bills and buy essential goods if they receive the same salary. Now Ranil is saying that they are expecting an increase. We all know that. The private sector is also requested to provide it. Now we ask you, did you increase the electricity tariffs of the private sector employee to see if they could pay it? Don't expect to leave calmly after imposing taxes. We came to say that if you are not prepared to give us the 20,000 rupees, then expect this fight to go on until we win the 20,000 rupees. The people are tired now and the working class are exhausted. They cannot move forward anymore. Therefore, instead of imposing more and more taxes and wasting the money that you are stealing from the people, you must provide the entire working sector with the 20,000 rupee allowance that they deserve. If we don't get it, we tell the Ranil Rajapaksa government that they can't stop the fight of the people.
Our correspondent said that the group protested for almost an hour.
From that, we move on to a very somber story from Balangoda. We bring you a heart-rending tragedy where a mother, father and two daughters of the same family were reported missing in a landslide in Vahintanna, Gavaranghena, Balangoda.
Part of the Bambaragala mountain in the Vahintan area of Balangoda collapsed due to heavy showers at around 7 last night. The mound of earth collapsed onto 3 houses and one house was completely buried under the mound. 45-year-old Chaminda Surit Kumara and 40-year-old Siriyavati were in the house with their 2 daughters Tasara and Vimansa at the time of the landslide. After the mound of earth collapsed, urgent search operations were launched to locate the missing persons with the intervention of the army, police and local residents. The search operations, which were temporarily suspended last night, resumed this morning. This morning, officers from the Ratnapura National Building Research Organisation and Ratnapura Disaster Management Unit came and inspected the landslide site. After that, the Ratnapura National Building Research Organisation arranged to evacuate 25 people belonging to 7 families who had settled near the landslide Bambaragala mountain. Search operations are still underway to locate the missing persons.
Meanwhile, State Minister of Defence Pramita Bandara Tennakone expressed his opinion regarding the landslide incident that took place in Gavaranghena, Balangoda last night.
This situation has arisen in an area where the National Building Research Organisation has issued risk orders. Due to those orders, citizens living in those areas have sought protection in safety centres. We promise that we are working with the armed forces to find these missing people.
A mound of earth has collapsed on a house in the Elliott Road area in Galle, owing to the heavy rains in the area since 2 p.m. yesterday. The other 5 houses on the hill above the damaged house are also in serious danger. Fortunately, there was no one in the house at the time of the event. Several places in the village of Nikapotha belonging to the Haldumulla Divisional Secretariat are currently in danger of being destroyed in the earth slip prone area. Due to the recent earth slips, many houses in this village where roughly 75 families live have been damaged. The local residents say that presently erosion and sinkholes have developed rapidly. Owing to this, a situation has arisen where the water is not stagnant in the fields but instead seeps into the soil. The people of this village, who are living in dangerous conditions, demand that they be moved to a safe place as soon as possible. Meanwhile, 2 people who were walking on a dam across Devon Fall in Dimulapatana were caught in current and swept away. The individuals who have disappeared were residents of Dimulapatana Craiglig Estate, aged 42 and 51. This accident occurred on the 11th and the police revealed that the body of one person was found in Kotmaleoya below the Devon waterfall yesterday afternoon. Search and rescue operations are still underway to find the other missing person.
Today is the 7th day of the 7th edition of the Gum at the Door-to-Door campaign. Gum at the teams visited villages in the Vaunia, Anuradhapura and Galle districts.
This report was filed by the Gum at the team that went door-to-door in the Anuradhapura district. This is Moragahavela School in Kadagasthigiliya. Although the saying goes that when a school opens, a prison closes, it has been 9 years since this school was closed.
දුකයි මේ ගම් වලට මෙහෙම මුණියයි කියලා. එන්න මේ වල බිහිවීම යනවා. ළමයිගේ අධ්‍යාපනය කොහොමද දැන් නගරේ අනුරාධපුරයට නැත්තම් මෙහෙන්තලේ කාර්යශාලා යන එක දෙමව්පියෝ කොච්චර වියදමක් කරනවද? හරි දුකයි ඉතින්. නිදහස් අධ්‍යාපනය මෙහෙම වීම.
These villagers can barely afford to buy school supplies for their children, let alone pay for school vehicles. The villagers said education, which is the only path for their children to get out of their current plight, is at risk. The Gum at the team also travelled to Andaragolava in Kadagasthigiliya. The villagers who are fighting to fend for themselves have fallen from the frying pan to the fire.
කරන්ට් බිලක් දැන් ගණන් මේක ගෙවා ගන්න විදියකුත් නැහැ. ජීවත් වෙන්න හරි අමාරුයි සර්. මම ඇත්තම කතාව කියන සමහර විට මගේ දරුවන්ට මගේ ඉඳලා කන්න දීලා තියෙනවා. ඈ මේ දුක් කරදර මැද්දේ තමයි අපි හැමදේම ජීවත් වෙන්නේ. ඉඳලා කියන්නම් මම. හැමදාම දුක් විඳින්න හැමදාම බුදුන්ට බුදු පහන තියලා කියන්නේ. ඒ ගෙදර හදලා දෙන්න මැරෙනකොට මල කඳ හරි තියා ගන්න මට. එච්චරයි ඔබතුමාගෙන් මම බලාපොරොත්තු වෙන්නේ සර්.
The people who can barely make ends meet have now been battered by the electricity tariffs. They sell their pottery for a low cost. What is left to talk of the profit that they make?
කාලේ 1000ක් විතර ආවට දැන් ඉතින් 4000ක් ගත්තේ එනවා කිලෝ. මාසෙම අපි මේ වැඩ කරනවානේ. සතියේ ඉතින් රුපියල් 500ක් 1000ක් වගේ හම්බ වෙනවා ඉතින් ඔව්.
Like many villages in Sri Lanka, there is a useless elephant fence around the village of Vaunia. There are 100 families in the Panariketukulam village in Vaunia. Many people are kidney patients. Although Galle is a developed city, there are villages where transportation is still not developed. The people of Panangala village live a dangerous life on a dilapidated vine bridge. Our teams are ready to tour from door to door tomorrow as well.
Made in Sri Lanka. Newsfirst with the people.
On to another headline-making story. The chairman of the Central Environment Authority, who was arrested and remanded on suspicion of soliciting bribes, has been released on bail. The chairman was brought before the Alutkade Magistrates Court today.
3 people, including the chairman of the Central Environment Authority, have been arrested by the Commission to investigate bribery or corruption on the 10th of this month. They were arrested after they were accused of soliciting a bribe of 10 million rupees. The chairman of the CEA has allegedly requested the amount from the complainant in order to issue the annual environmental projection license given by the Central Environmental Authority for a project of refining crude oil. The Bribery Commission stated that the chairman of the Central Environment Authority and the other 2 persons were arrested in the midst of a transaction.
Meanwhile, Sports Minister Roshan Ranasinghe arrived at the Criminal Investigation Department today.
It is reported that the Ministry of Sports submitted a complaint to the CID regarding the threats to his life.
Sports Minister Roshan Ranasinghe filed objections before Court of Appeal through his lawyers, requesting the removal of the interim order issued recently suspending the work of the interim committee appointed to manage the affairs of Sri Lanka cricket.
The Court of Appeal, which considered a petition filed by Sri Lanka Cricket, issued a stay order on the 7th of November suspending the activities of the Interim Cricket Committee headed by Arjuna Ranatunga and the related Gazette announcement. The Ministry of Sports filed a motion today requesting the removal of the interim order. The objections were submitted through attorney G.G. Arul Pragasam.
The commemoration of November Heroes organised by the JVP was held in Maharagama today.
The 34th commemoration of the November Heroes was celebrated today. A group including the leader of the JJB, Anurakumara Disanaika, were present at the event.
The commemoration of the November Heroes that we celebrate today is an extremely important event. There is a major need for a social change. Do we have a right to gamble with those beliefs? No, we don't have any right to bargain with their expectations. It is our responsibility to make those expectations a reality. It will become a reality only by uplifting businesses. That is what we believe. We are not saying that we are able to minimize corruption in the country because we have a magical ability, but because we have the support of a pure business. The reason why powerful people with the biggest family background become timid in front of us is not personal factors, but because of the business. We must make this right.
The Supreme Court has determined that the regulations number 1 of 2021 of the Prevention of Terrorism Act that had been brought by the government are in violation of the fundamental rights of the people, which are guaranteed under Articles 10, 12(1) and 13 of the Constitution.
The Supreme Court had delivered this verdict with regard to a petition filed by a group of individuals including Dr. Pakishoti Saravanamuttu, Abdul Sharur, Ambika Satkunanathan and the Centre for Policy Alternatives. In its determination, the Supreme Court has said it is not practically possible for the court to suggest amendments to rectify the regulations to align with all fundamental rights due to their inherent flaws. The court also makes the declaration that the impunged regulations are null and void. The case was heard before a 3-judge bench comprising of Justices President's Counsel Buwanekalu Vihare, President's Counsel Murdu N.B. Fernando and Mahinda Samayawardana.
World Diabetes Day is commemorated on the 14th of November every year. In line with this, Newsfirst's Naveksha Gunasekara spoke to the President of the Diabetes Association of Sri Lanka, Dr. Manilka Sumanathilaka, regarding the impact of diabetes on the health of people and the opportunities to strengthen the prevention, diagnosis and treatment of diabetes.
Doctor, starting off, tell me what is the theme of this year's World Diabetes Day?
So the theme this year is Know Your Risk, Know Your Response. That itself means that people who are at risk should be identified and they should be taught how to prevent diabetes.
We saw that the Health Ministry has also expressed concern over the increase in the number of patients being reported.
Numbers are staggering and I would say scary as well from a health point of view, because the most recent survey done by the Ministry of Health and the WHO showed an island-wide prevalence of in the adults above 18-year-olds nearly 15%. In the Colombo district especially, it was touching 30%. So 1 in 3 people. So we need to verify these numbers as well. But we can see as clinicians working in hospitals, daily the numbers are increasing.
What are the symptoms that we can sort of detect the disease at an early stage?
Typical symptoms of diabetes would be increased thirst, passing lots of urine, unintentional weight loss, non-healing wounds, urinary tract infections, numbness, blurring of vision. Those are the symptoms. But the most important thing is that 50% of the people don't get any symptoms. I'm talking especially about type 2 diabetes. So unless you screen until you get complications, sometimes people don't get any symptoms. Now with these numbers, type 2 diabetes is becoming almost a lifestyle disease.
We used to think consuming sugar, as in sweets or sugary drinks and so on, would lead to diabetes, but now we see that it's in your carbohydrates, it can be in your rice and so on. So what are the kind of foods that we have to avoid in order to prevent getting diabetes?
Sometimes people get a wrong idea. When you get diabetes, you can't eat anything. So what we say is, of course, refined sugars you have to avoid as much as possible. But the carbohydrates, the rice and the even bread, brown bread is fine, but a limited quantity. And of course, increasing the green leafy vegetables and the fiber-rich food. It's a matter of, you can have a drink, but then it's a matter of balancing how much you can burn for a day and how much you will take in.
Someone has already been diagnosed with diabetes. Is there any way that you can reverse it?
Yes, that's the focus with the staggering numbers. We are actively looking at, especially within the first 5 years, younger people, type 2 diabetes can be reversed. We don't say a permanent cure, but for at least for a 5 to 10 years, there are instances that we have reversed with a very good diet, exercise, and reducing at least 10% of your excess weight. I think this is a disease that you don't have to worry too much if you can stick to a healthy lifestyle and follow the medical instructions and try to maintain your body weight. We can easily prevent type 2 diabetes.
Day 47 of the second leg of the Divi Savya program organized by the LOLC group got underway today.
The second leg of the LOLC Divisavya program targets Sri Lankan schools with less than 100 students. Today's program was held centering the Nuwara district. This World initiative is a collaboration between the LOLC group and the Ministry of Education.
US Ambassador to Sri Lanka Julie Chung toured Batticaloa today to explore the partnership between the two countries, whilst also creating opportunities for Sri Lankans to evolve and work together to create a bright future. Julie Chung took to the social media platform X, formerly known as Twitter, to share details of a meeting with the National Peace Council's local Interreligious Committee of Batticaloa, touching on several issues faced by the people of the area. The ambassador also touched on the importance of religious communities in the country. Ambassador Julie Chung also visited the statue of Eugene John Hebert and the Zion Church, where she held a discussion with Pastor Roshan Mahesan on the devastating impact of the Easter attacks. In news from overseas, British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak brought back former leader David Cameron as Foreign Minister earlier today in a reshuffle triggered by his firing of Interior Minister Suella Braverman after her criticism of police threatened his authority.
It was the latest reset for a Prime Minister whose party is badly lagging the Labour Party before an election expected next year. The return of Cameron suggested Sunak wanted to bring in a more centrist, experienced hand rather than appease the right of his party, which supported Braverman. It also reawakens divisive debate over Brexit. Cameron held the referendum on European Union membership in 2016 and was hated by many on the right of the party after he campaigned to remain. He quit hours before Britain voted to leave. Under fire from opposition lawmakers and members of the governing Conservative Party to eject Braverman, Sunak seemed to have brought forward a long-planned reshuffle to bring in allies and remove ministers he felt were not performing. His hand was forced when the ever-controversial Braverman defied him last week in an unauthorized article accusing the police of quote-unquote double standards at protests, suggesting they were tough on right-wing demonstrators but easy on pro-Palestinian marchers. The opposition Labour Party said that inflamed tensions between a pro-Palestinian demonstration and a far-right counter-protest on Saturday when nearly 150 people were arrested. While her removal was not a surprise, it was the appointment of Cameron which caused shock in the Conservative Party, welcomed by most centrist lawmakers but loathed by some on the right who described it as the ultimate Brexit surrender.
Israeli airstrikes in Gaza have killed more than a dozen people and destroyed the main hospital's cardiac ward as fighting continues in the besieged strip for the 37th consecutive day.
Gaza officials reported on Sunday at least 13 people were killed in an Israeli airstrike on a home in Khan Yunis. The United Nations Development Programme said the day before at least several people were killed and wounded in a strike at a UN compound in Gaza City where hundreds had sheltered. The Al-Quds hospital, the second largest in Gaza, has ceased operations because of fuel shortages as Israeli forces continue to bomb and besiege the enclave. Al-Quds hospital joins Al-Shifa hospital, the biggest healthcare facility. Authorities say hundreds of wounded under treatment could die as Israeli forces surround facilities with snipers and tanks. The United States attacked a command and control facility in Syria housing an Iran-backed militia. The strikes appear to be the latest response to a series of attacks against American forces in Syria and Iraq.
Sri Lankan cricket superstar Aravinda De Silva is among the 3 new additions to the ICC Hall of Fame.
The International Cricket Council today announced the 3 new additions to the ICC Hall of Fame. Sri Lanka superstar Aravinda De Silva, Indian opener Virendra Sehwag, Indian trailblazer Diana Edulji. A winner of the ICC Men's Cricket World Cup with Sri Lanka in 1996 and a classy batter that valued his own wicket, De Silva joins the ICC Cricket Hall of Fame in 2023. The consistent right-hander scored 20 Test centuries during an 18-year international career, the third most hundreds by any Sri Lanka men's player, and was just as adept against the white ball with another 11 centuries, coming in 50-over cricket. The most important of those was in the 1996 World Cup final, as De Silva almost single-handedly wheeled his side over the line against Australia with an unbeaten 107 in what was an unforgettable run chase. De Silva was well renowned at being able to adapt the way he played depending on the circumstances and was an integral part in Sri Lanka's resurgence at the end of last century.
Go a step further and say win a World Cup.
And that's a wrap of Primetime News for tonight. Take care and good night.